Hey, and welcome to Home Library. My name is Tess Phillip, and I started this channel a little while ago, and it's all about instilling a love for learning and reading in your family and in your home. And I am here to share something really exciting. It's the beginning of what will probably be a bit of a series because I'm going to take my time reading this book. This is called The Enchanted Hour by Meghan Cox Gurdon. And it falls into the same category as books like Honey for the Child's Heart by Gladys Hunt, the Read Aloud Handbook by Jim Trelease, I think it is, and Sarah Mackenzie's The Read Aloud Family. They're all kind of very similar. The other two I have on my Kindle, both the Read Aloud ones. Honey for the Child's Heart, I learned my lesson. I know that I need to have these sort of books in my hands. I just picked this, I just bonked myself in the face. I picked this one up over the weekend, and I read the introduction and chapter 1 today, and I'm already like so in love. I'm so excited. What I feel like has made this book stand out so far is that Meghan Cox Gurdon is focusing a bit more on like the scientific side. Not that the others didn't, but she's referencing a lot of scientific studies, which is really exciting because it really solidifies the why in terms of why do we read aloud to our children? Why is it important to sit down and read to them? So I'm going to read a little bit to you, and I'm going to go through some of my notes in the margins and just chat with you about what the introduction and part 1, chapter 1 were all about. So I'm going to come right back to the beginning of the introduction. I didn't get very far into the introduction before I started highlighting things. Yeah, like not even down to the bottom of the first page of the introduction. Brilliant. So she says, what reading aloud is and what can it do? It is not just a simple, cozy, nostalgic pastime that can be taken up or dropped without consequence. It needs to be recognized as the dazzling, transformative, and even countercultural act that it is. And I think what really drew me to that was that it can't just be picked up and dropped. There's consequences with that. But then with picking it up and doing our best to make it a consistent part of our home culture, that's the opposite of a positive consequence will come from that. Like amazing things happen. So I'm going to read one more part before I start talking because she just does it so well. I can't summarize this well enough. So I'm just going to read you one more paragraph. It's so good. She says, as we shall see, listening to stories while looking at pictures stimulates children's deep brain networks, fostering their optimal cognitive development. Further, the companionable experience of shared reading cultivates empathy, dramatically accelerates young children's language acquisition, and vaults them ahead of their peers when they get to school. The rewards of early reading are astonishingly meaningful. Toddlers who have lots of stories read to them turn into children who are more likely to enjoy strong relationships, stronger focus, a greater emotional resilience, and self-mastery. The evidence has become so overwhelming that social scientists now consider read aloud time one of the most important indicators of a child's prospects in life. Like if that's not convincing enough for us to sit down and read a few books to our kids every day, I really don't know what is. And she goes into the science, like the research and the evidence behind all of this, which is so exciting. And she goes on to talk, and I've just got some notes in the margin, so I'm going to keep looking down, but life as a mama is not easy, right? Like even today, my day was full. I hate using the word busy, but it was full. Like from the moment my feet got out of bed, I was making breakfast, cleaning the kitchen, making sure my children were fed, reading to them, playing with them, cleaning the house. Like there's just a lot going on, and I'm a stay-at-home mom. Moms that work outside of the home, you've got what happens in the home plus work outside. Like this parenthood journey is not an easy thing. And so what I loved about this, she's like, reading aloud doesn't just help our kids, it actually helps us too. It helps kind of ground us and recenter us, and we can get lost in a book and we can enjoy those moments of snuggling with our kids and reading together. Like it does something for us as well, like for our souls. It helps us to calm down and, you know, find comfort and consolidation and consolidation is not the word I was looking for. But it helps us, right, to center ourselves and regroup. So those reading together, reading aloud moments are not just good for our kids, but they're good for us as mamas and parents as well. And she goes on to say, like, reading together, it draws us together and it unites us. We start to form special connections over books. Like, there's so many common phrases in my family that we share that have come out of books. I don't know if you've read Tacky the Penguin Goes to Camp by Helen Lester, but there's a line in that book that says "wants more," and he's talking about s'mores, like the graham cracker marshmallow chocolate deal. But now in our house, like whenever anybody says "want some more," it turns into "wants more," and it's always followed by laughter. Now, you may not know about anything that I just talked about, or you may have read that book, and now we are instantly connected as well. And so would our kids be. Like, books have that ability to connect us to the book, to the author, and to each other. So that time spent together in read aloud is so valuable for those deep connections, right? And the language of stories, and this is something that I learned a long time ago while teaching about language development, but then now seeing it in my children in another context has just like solidified that knowledge that I had before. So I used to be a primary classroom teacher. I was teaching overseas, not in Canada, and a lot of my students were multilingual children. So mom would speak one language, dad would speak another language, and sometimes school was in a third language. Okay, so we're looking at lots of language to be processed and used. And there's a lot that goes into that. But what we noticed is the more that the kids were read to in any particular language, that vocabulary would develop faster. And what we learned in studying how to teach children that are learning multiple languages, there's a natural progression of language, right? First you learn to listen and understand, right? Then you learn to speak, then you learn to read, and then you learn to write, right? It's very natural. If you think about your children, the first thing your baby learned was how to hear the sounds you're making and how to respond to them. And then they start babbling, trying to copy you, and then they speak. And then as they get older, they start to recognize that there's words to process. They begin to read. And the better they get at reading, the better they get at writing. Like, it's a natural progression, right? And so science is now trying to understand more about how this happens. But basically, when we read to our children, the language of the stories help develop that linguistic scaffolding of early speech, right? So you're developing their vocabulary even before they have it. And if you continue to do this, like, and we're talking about like past even that 3 to 5 age range, right? If you keep reading to them texts or books that are like just outside of their own ability to read independently, you're setting them up for success to read at that next level, because they're hearing vocabulary of that next level of reading. They're learning how the flow of those sentences go. And then when they come upon those, when they're ready to read those words, they won't have to do as much decoding work and understanding work, because once they do decode, they're like, and they figure out the word, and then they read the sentence again. They're like, oh, I've heard mom and dad read that word to me before in a different book, and my brain knows that, and so I know what this means, and I don't have to do any more work to understand what I'm reading. So the more we read, the more we set them up for successful little moments like that, right? Just amazing. I've got books here circled that I'm definitely gonna check out as well. She's already recommending some books that she enjoys reading to her kids, which is really great. Some evidence, right? It turns out that getting young children to interact with text and talking about the pictures and the stories as you go hugely intensifies the benefits they get from the time you spend reading together. and she's going to go into more detail later on in the book. We're into chapter 1 now, but I put a big line in the margin, because one of my big strategies, and I talk about this more in my Patreon membership. I give every little while, I give new strategies that you can work on at home, and one of the strategies that's going to be up there, we're getting it ready in my Patreon membership, is pointing. So I'm going to give you a little inside bit there, but pointing to pictures helps kids understand what to process and how to process it. And when we point and we talk, or if we point to the text while we're reading, they start to understand what and how to process, and it makes that whole experience, when it's their turn to do the hard work, so much easier. Pointing to text and pictures does amazing things, and she said it too. So does science. Amazing. I love this book already. My son was watching me read this book today. I was sitting on the sofa, and I just had this smile on my face, because I was just so much joy seeing the things that I'm experiencing, and being able to attach it to scientific evidence now is so cool. But I could see that he was enjoying me enjoying the book. It was really cute. I've got more evidence for why we read aloud. So reading regularly with young children, it stimulates optimal patterns of brain development, and strengthens parent-child relationships at critical time in child development, which in turn builds language, literacy, and social-emotional skills that will last a lifetime. Optimal patterns of brain development, stronger parent-child relationships, skills that last a lifetime. If reading aloud were a pill, every child in the country would get a prescription. All that we need to do is read. All of these things that we innately want and desire for our children can actually simply be built just from spending some time reading with our kiddos. So Dr. Hutton is the researcher that she is getting pointing towards a lot of his studies at one of the children's hospitals in the United States, and they're doing a lot of MRI and brain imaging while children are being exposed to different types of literature. And I thought that one of the studies was really exciting. It was talking about, so they did a test where the children were just listening to a story, then they were listening to one and seeing the illustrations of the story, and then they were listening to one and watching an animated version of the story. And they were trying to see, there was a particular part of the brain, I didn't highlight that, I'm not gonna be able to find it quick enough, but basically they were looking at when does that brain hit that optimal zone where the brain is processing as much as it possibly could. And it was not when they were just listening, and definitely not when they were watching. That was actually the lowest engagement, but it was when they were listening and looking at the pictures. And what was happening there was, again, it's this brain processing, right? Those neurological receptors crossing, and the more that they do that, the better those connections get. So when you've got pictures and text and you're reading and looking, it gives you more of a context, right? And especially if we're looking at younger kids, they need that time to see the pictures with the vocabulary to make the connections, so that their brain can create their own images, and their imagination can be big enough to make pictures out of the words that they see. So it's just, again, pointing to how crucial picture book stage is in terms of reading. And I think that, and I'm so guilty of this sometimes too, I'm I can't wait to read chapter books to my kids. There are some series that I'm just oh, come on, get a little older, get a little bigger, that way we can read Anne of Green Gables and the Chronicles of Narnia and Harry Potter, and I'm in for all of it. I think it's all so exciting that, but they're just not ready yet. And I have to remind myself that the picture book stage is also so important, because it helps them build their vocabulary, build their imagination, and develop their own creativity. And so, yeah, I just remind myself, and we borrow lots of picture books from the library, and we read a lot of picture books. Let me see where we are. Yes, so language, imagination, and attention. Yeah, how wonderful those things are. I've got so much. Yeah, I talked about that. And how limited this time is, right? So like we're gonna get to the stage of reading chapter books, and eventually they will want to read more on their own and independently, and that's fine too. I'm gonna try and read to them for as long as they'll absolutely let me. But this stage of board books and picture books, it will go, right? Like it's not gonna last forever. And so enjoying that short limited time that we have, like we know they grow up too fast. My youngest is turning 4 this week, and my goodness, like he's 4, my little one is 4, and like how fast the time has flown, and before I know it he's going to be 8. And you know, this season of picture books and board books will shift and change and ebb and flow, and I want to enjoy it for as long as I possibly can. Yeah. Oh, and then she gets into math. Okay. As a teacher, I cannot tell you how many times I experienced this, especially teaching in schools where we've got multilingual learners, right? Students would struggle in math, but actually math wasn't the problem. The vocabulary and the language was. And she was talking about like scientific studies and evidence, and she goes into a lot of detail. But math is not just numbers and equations. A lot of math is vocabulary dependent. And so having access to that vocabulary and understanding those words and the stories that go around math really improves mathematical abilities. So if children are struggling in math, sometimes it's not always even a math thing. Sometimes it's a language thing, right? Like if you think about how many words in the English language we use to do sum, addition, plus, like that it can be so confusing if you don't have all of those words and you don't know that all those words mean the same thing, right? When you're looking at subtraction and difference and all of that. So just more evidence for that. And I love as she comes towards the end of chapter 1, she's like a reader, a book, a listener. And there's a phrase, I guess, that was taken from some nonprofit upstate in New York. They talked about any time, any place. And it's not about perfection. It's not about a magic number, though they do have some guidelines and recommendations based on scientific evidence. But really what it comes down to is finding those moments that work for you and your family to read together, right? And I'm going to read this list because it's beautiful. And this is not mutually exclusive. I think what you should feel from reading this list is that anytime you can get a book in, and any place you can get a book in, then that's great. And even if it's not a whole book, even if it's just a couple of pages, that's great. That's great. So here it is. I'm going to end with this today. For some families, reading at breakfast while the baby is strapped into a high chair might be the best opportunity. It might be 40 minutes with a toddler on the sofa before nap time, or 10 minutes while father and daughter are waiting in a doctor's office. Reading might happen when young children are in the bath, or when everyone's taking the subway, or even over the phone to a child far away. It might mean converting a tedious half an hour in an airport departure lounge to an entire half an hour of reading, or opening a book at the table while children are having an early supper of macaroni and cheese. It might be a full luxurious hour with the whole family every evening before bed. Anytime, any place goes the Read Aloud slogan of Literacy Nonprofit in upstate New York. And that's exactly right. Anytime, any place, get a book in your hands and read with your kiddos. So that was the introduction in chapter 1. I am going to read slowly through this book, and every time I finish a chapter or 2, I am gonna record a video like this one, unedited. I'm gonna grab my notes in the margin. I'm gonna talk to you. I'm gonna stumble over some of my words, and I'm gonna share with you how I've connected to the book so far, what I'm learning, what I'm excited about, what I'm connecting with my past and being able to bring it up here. And if you want to read it, it's called The Enchanted Hour by Meghan Cox Gurdon. Yeah, I'm only on chapter 1, but already I love it. I know it's going to be fabulous, and it's come highly recommended by some really fabulous people. So yeah, I'll see you next time when I'm done another chapter or 2. Bye.